Fabulous. Thank you very much, Ruth Ann. I wanted to, usually we do a little bit longer introduction, but I want to give our Orsted guests an opportunity to use their full time. So let me just give I think everybody's been on Green Drinks, but just a reminder that Green Drinks is an international organization that started with a bunch of Brits in a pub and said, hey guys, let's all just get together and share some ideas that we think are good and get together and see what linkages we can make and have a few beers. So obviously we can't, well, you can have your own beer. I think somebody just said they had a martini, but it should be green. So we're nonpartisan. And we started, oh gosh, Dee and I kind of jumped on an idea that came from a gentleman, Phil Gross, who had started it a while ago, and we sort of breathed some new wind into it, so to speak, and started October, is that amazing, in 2019. Also following along Sussex County. Hi, Bill Grayson, for joining us. So we have so Dee and me, and along with the Sierra Club Delaware chapter, the Citizens Climate Lobby, Wilmington, Newark chapter, Plastic Free Delaware, Preservation Delaware, and Dee Durham. So we have, you know, some backers and all that. And I would urge any of you to check us out on Facebook and like us, because then, as you know, that kind of gets Facebook rolling. My announcement for new news is October 18th will be the next Green Drinks, and it's going to be Healthy Foods for Healthy Kids, which is a program that supports school gardens throughout Delaware, and their executive director will be our speaker. So drum roll, our good buddy Danny Van Drew has rousted up Brady Walker and Matt Drew from Orsted, and Brady's the Mid-Atlantic market manager, and you're going to walk us through an overview of the Skipjack project and its development and how the Maryland Public Service Commission process works for reviewing offshore wind projects. And Matt Drew is the onshore infrastructure construction manager, who'll tell us about operations and maintenance of the project on land and how the cable will be landed in Delaware and connected to the grid, and about potential for jobs and the supply chain created by building out the wind project. So without further ado, drum roll, off you go, guys.
All right.
We all set up to do this here?
I think we're all good. Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Always good to be with this group, and as you said, joined by Danny and Matt. We're really looking forward to the discussion this evening. We do have some slides that we thought it might be wise to run through, but really would like to make this a discussion. So so please feel free to ask questions. We're really looking forward to getting into the details around our plans for Skipjack. I think it looks like there's a good crowd, so probably makes sense just to spend a few minutes, even though I know a lot of people on the line are familiar with Orsted. But we are the global leader in offshore wind development. We are celebrating this year 30 years of experience in the industry. We developed the world's first offshore wind farm called Vindeby in 1991, and actually just went through the process of decommissioning that wind farm late last year. So the first developer to build an offshore wind farm, but the only one in the world that has been all the way through the process from development, operation, and now decommissioning. So a lot of really great lessons learned from that process that will certainly be applied across the world and here in the United States as we work to really just bring the industry to life at this point. But 28 wind farms currently in operation across the world. That includes the first wind farm in the United States that we own and operate, Block Island Wind Farm, and of course the world's largest wind farm that's currently in operation. Matt, do you want to talk a little bit about Orsted's history?
Sure. So hopefully you can hear me okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Matt Drew. Appreciate the introduction and the opportunity to speak this evening. I'm the Onshore Infrastructure Construction Manager. That's a super long title. My job is, in essence, to build the things onshore that enable the wind farm offshore to function. So, but I think this slide is a representation of our core mission. We start most meetings by reflecting on this, and it's Ørsted's vision to create a world that runs entirely on green energy. Now, as we stand here today, Brady talked a little bit about the accomplishments of our company to this point. But if we go back 30 plus years ago, a lot of ways we were a traditional fossil fuel energy producer. The name of our company was not Ørsted. The name of our company was the Danish Oil and Natural Gas Company. So that gives you a sense of the kind of business that we were in. One of the ways I like to think of our company is that 30 years ago, we were, in essence, the Delmarva Power, if you will, of Denmark. We had responsibility for generation. We owned transmission assets in the country, but all that energy came from coal and oil predominantly. In the 30 years since then, we've transformed our company to a company that is over 95% run from offshore wind energy, and we've not only done that for the country of Denmark, but as Brady mentioned, we've performed projects all over the world. So the idea of transforming from a black energy company to a green energy company, I think is tremendous. I've been with the company for 2 years, and some of our colleagues in Denmark were part of those first projects where, for all intents and purposes, land-based turbines were put offshore, and they were commissioned and then scaled, and then lessons were learned, and we got better and better at doing it, and now we have the largest presence in the whole world. So, but we think it's important not only for us as a company, because it's of value to us as people who are involved in the business. We believe in this as our core statement, but we also think it's an example for other companies to follow as well. I don't think anybody from Delmarva Power is on the call, so I don't mean to single Delmarva Power out. They've been a great, I'm one of their customers, and they've been a great client of mine in my previous life when I was in the engineering consulting business. So they're a great company, but I think it just serves as a good example of what a company can do, and also what a company can do to set a good example for stewardship in the rest of the world.
Absolutely. Thanks, Matt. And sort of with that in mind, I think always important to just take a few minutes and look at sort of the state of the industry in the United States right now, which is what this slide will show you. These gray and blue boxes represent all of the current lease areas, wind energy areas that have been identified by the federal government off the coast of the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast. And as I think all of you know, that's really where this process begins with the federal government. And the Department of the Interior's Bureau of Ocean Energy Management is really the lead agency in charge of identifying and deconflicting these lease areas. But as you can imagine, there's a long list of federal agencies and departments that are involved in that process. It's a lengthy analysis that also includes input from state and local governments before a decision is finalized to identify a leased area and then prepare it for auction at the federal level. And that's when a developer like Ørsted has the opportunity to bid on the rights to develop offshore wind projects inside those boundaries, subject to a project award and then a lengthy permitting process. So once you've got the rights to develop a project inside a wind energy area, you can then compete in state auctions for offshore wind projects. The states right now really are the market makers in the U.S. And we're competing for projects successfully, really up and down the East Coast. But what this slide really illustrates is that we've got quite a long way to go. If you look at those gray bars, you'll see where the targets are right now. And these targets are increasing year over year as states look to expand their renewable energy strategies and make offshore wind a really important part of those strategies. So even relative to where we are now, states have awarded really only a fraction of what the target looks like. And when you think about this in the context, especially of President Biden's goal of 30 gigawatts of offshore wind energy by the end of the decade, certainly we are in a hurry, as is the rest of the industry. And here, sort of looking one level down, is a view of Ørsted's presence in the U.S. You can see, of course, we've got Block Island Wind Farm that we own and operate off the coast of Rhode Island. It's about 5 miles off the coast of Rhode Island in state waters. And then, of course, we have got 6 projects in development. And I think since the last time we presented, we've actually added one, Ocean Wind 2, to that list, project that we were successfully awarded close to the end of July this past summer. So between Ocean Wind 1 and 2, we'll power close to 1 million homes in New Jersey. So a really significant project award that put us in the lead, both in terms of number of projects in development and megawatts in development in the United States. 4 gigawatts currently in development, something we're very proud of. What's not shown on this slide is the coastal Virginia offshore wind test plot that Ørsted constructed on behalf of and in partnership with Dominion Energy and BOEM in, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was the fall of 2020, close to a year ago.
Right.
2 turbines, the first 2 turbines ever built in federal waters. Those 2, if you went off the offshore of Virginia Beach, you would see those 2 turbines spinning in operation right now. Of course, we'll be joined by many more as Virginia works to develop the lease area that exists off the coast of Virginia right here. This area right here, if you can see my cursor. Matt, anything to add on that one?
No, I think that one was a really great project. 2 turbines doesn't sound like a lot, but the most significant thing for it was the ability to construct in federal waters and get permits in federal waters. That was a first for that project, and I think that helped set allowed for a lot of clarity in terms of understanding what the path forward is going to be for permitting, and that a lot of other projects, both Ørsted projects and projects developed by other developers, benefited from. So that one, in my mind, was as significant a permitting win as it was an engineering and construction win.
Great. Okay, we'll take it one level down into the skipjack project. I think it's probably good just to take a minute to look at where our lease area is located relative to the Delaware coast. We're happy to share these slides at the end of the presentation, but there's a great resource, which is where we got this screenshot from, 4C Offshore. You can actually view current information about offshore wind projects all over the world with that resource, including information about the projects that are going to be located off the coast of Delaware here. So our lease area, I think, as many of you know, is the one that's inside that blue box. Skipjack 1 is a project that's currently in development in the southern part of that lease area. And our proposed Skipjack 2, which we'll talk about in a lot more detail here in just a few minutes, will actually take up part of that upper lighter purple box there to the north as we look to build out that lease area. So to recap, Skipjack 1 is a 120 megawatt project that was awarded in 2017 by the Maryland Public Service Commission. It's located just about between 20 and 22 miles off the coast of Maryland and Delaware at the closest point. It will generate enough energy to power about 40,000 homes in the region, and right now we're targeting that project for commercial operation in the second half of 2026. And we'll glad to talk about landfall and all those issues that we mentioned at the beginning. But I think it probably makes sense to do that in the context of Skipjack 2, which is the second project that we are proposing for this lease area. We've submitted a bid to the Maryland Public Service Commission for a project of up to 760 megawatts that we would deliver at the same time as Skipjack 1. So in the second half of 2026, we'd aim to bring both projects online, 880 megawatts, powering close to 300,000 homes in the region. And what that allows us to do is consolidate construction timelines and resources, as well as a landfall and interconnection, making that process, or helping to make that process as unobtrusive as is possible. That's something that is really a priority for us as we evaluate alternatives to landfall and interconnection solutions along the Delaware coast. And delivering the projects in this way, of course, allows us to use one site for landfall and bring one cable into that site one time. So we are right now in the middle. I know you're all very interested in the process. We're right now really, I think, in probably the beginning third of the Public Service Commission's evaluation. We've submitted some written testimony and are in a discovery period with a number of parties that have joined the docket. The Public Service Commission will hold evidentiary proceedings or hearings at the end of October into early November, and we expect that the Commission will make a decision by mid-December this year. I would also note, many of you may be aware that the Public Service Commission has opened an opportunity for public comment as part of this process. They will hold two virtual public comment sessions for oral testimony. Those will take place on September 28th and 30th, both at 6 p.m. We can get you all the information for how to sign up for that if you aren't already. There's also an opportunity to submit written comments, and the deadline for that is November 19th. And there's a separate process for that, which we're happy to get you the details on as well. So I think to bring the conversation really into focus in Delaware, I think we should first start by talking about landfall and interconnection. And I'll just say before I throw it to Matt that this is really an exciting opportunity for Delaware businesses and Delaware residents. There will be really significant opportunity available as a result of our onshore work in Delaware. The substation that we will construct is going to require something on the order of a $200 million investment. We'll also need to spend considerably to upgrade the grid in the area, something on the order of $300 million to accommodate that additional capacity. And really what that translates into is jobs and opportunity for Delaware businesses to participate in that supply chain operation and the work to construct and then operate those facilities. So with that, I'll turn it over to Matt, and maybe you can talk, Matt, a little bit about what that onshore infrastructure will look like and what the improvements to the grid will mean for the region.
Absolutely. So maybe the best place to start is to say, as we sit here today, we are still looking at multiple options for where the cable would come ashore and multiple options for where ultimately the substation would be built and the interconnection into the existing PJM grid would take place. Part of the challenge, as you might imagine, is that with a combined skipjack 1, skipjack 2 project, we are talking about a very, very large injection, over 800 megawatts of power that would be put into the grid. And you know, as probably most people on the call are aware, there's really just a single feed to the Delmarva Peninsula that originates from the north and then is eventually distributed down to the south. So it's in essence the number of locations where it's even feasible to consider putting that much power on the grid are actually kind of limited because of the nature, I would almost say like the one-way nature, if you will, of the way the existing power distribution system is here. So with that in mind, though, we are looking at multiple locations. I know one of the things that we had looked at with the original skipjack project that we have decided to not move forward with, and I think everybody's pretty aware of this, is that we had looked at an option where the cable would come ashore, the substation would be built, and the interconnection would all happen at one single location, and that was in a state park in Fenwick. We've long since abandoned that, probably over a year ago, abandoned that for feasibility reasons. And then I will say also, from a simple size standpoint, now that we're looking at a much larger combined skipjack 1, skipjack 2 project, that much more narrows our options, if you will, because of the amount of power that we're going to generate. But having said that, you know, as Brady mentioned, we will be using local union labor to build the substation. We will be making an investment, and it will be in Delaware, where the cable comes ashore. There will likely be a distance of some miles to go from where the landfall comes ashore to where the substation is. So there's going to be something very similar to the same types of utility construction projects that we've all endured during construction, where by either Delmarva Power or Chesapeake Utilities or Comcast, where we will be burying the cable and putting it in a safe duct bank structure from where the cable comes ashore all the way into the substation. And then the substation itself is going to be quite a large building with high voltage electrical components, and then ultimately the tie-in into the PJM grid. So all those things are going to be done by local forces. We've taken a strategy where we will bring in what's known as an EPC contractor to do these works, and the EPC initials stand for engineering, procurement, and construction. And so this would be a contractor that completes the design of the works, buys the long lead equipment, and then ultimately the C is constructs the works. And in taking this approach, we think that it's the most efficient way to deliver a substation and an onshore cable installation, because from the start you pair up the engineering team with their great ideas about how they want to build it with the construction team, who have the real field and practical experience. You bring those together as a group. And so when we go to buy the substation, and when we go to the market for talking to EPC contractors, one of the things that we will do is to bring a selected group of contractors into the area and hold something like an open house or a job market, if you will, where those EPC contractors that are very large multinational companies who may or may not have any experience at all doing business in Delaware, they will get a chance to meet the local labor force, the local plumbers, the local electricians, maybe the small businesses who would never have the scope and staffing to go after large international contracts. But because in essence, this will be a contract that's going to be performed right in their backyard, and we as Ørsted will be placing a high expectation on the EPC contractors to use local labor and to work with local unions as much as possible. This is almost a matchmaking session, if you will, at this open house, where the small local contractors will get to meet these big companies, and the big companies will get to meet the small local contractors, and they'll get to start to have discussions. And we'll be doing this at a very, very early stage in the process, well before an award of the contract is made, so that when the EPC teams are starting to build their local teams of the companies who are going to help support them on a big or small basis, they can build that into their approach. They can build it into their construction and execution plans. They can build it into their pricing. They can work to get contracts established. They can do all of this upfront work so that when the day comes when they're ready to submit a proposal to us, everything has been pulled together, and they've made those relationships, and they've established the contracts, and we aren't going back after the fact and trying to implement local expertise into the bid. So that in general is the approach that we will be taking. It's an approach that we've taken in other projects, and it's worked quite well. We actually just before COVID, actually a year before COVID, in 2019, we held the first of these type of job fairs, and we had 4 EPC contractors come to Bethany Beach and talk with local contractors about the proposed project. So it's something we will continue to do over and over again to help, again, promote that idea that we want to see the economic development, the job creation, as much as possible happen with local businesses.
Great, thanks, Matt. I think just sort of building on that, these last 2 bullets here, I think really are important to mention, and that's that, of course, once construction of the wind farm is complete, it will be fully open for navigation for recreational commercial fishing activities and other marine uses and activities. Engagement with these communities is certainly something that we will continue to do. We know that there are some open questions, and unfortunately, because we have had such deep experience in the industry, we have sort of corresponding experience with addressing those concerns that may exist around commercial and recreational fishing activities. So that engagement is certainly something that will continue into the future. I think the other piece that's worth mentioning is that we will certainly be continuing our investment in Delaware environmental and community organizations that are committed to the protection and restoration and preservation of the unique community that is the Delaware coastline. That's something that we've done with the Center for the Inland Bays, work that will certainly continue with that organization, and we hope others as well as Skipjack's development continues. And what you'll see here in this list of benefits, certainly not an exhaustive one, but really a reflection of Ørsted's philosophy when it comes to stakeholder engagement and what it means to do this in a comprehensive, equitable, sustainable way, bringing this new industry to life here in the United States and in Maryland and Delaware. Ørsted, I think one of the things that really makes us unique in the industry is that we build, own, and operate our projects. So as Matt was saying, all of that work that we're going to do onshore, all of the work we're going to do offshore is all going to be done under the supervision of Ørsted, and we'll be part of this community for the life cycle of the wind farm, and hopefully for a long time after that. So, getting started with at least 30 years when you factor in the time it takes to actually develop and then operate the wind farm for the full life cycle. And so when we make commitments to local organizations or to businesses, those are really long-term relationships and trust that we are trying to build in the community. And each one of these groups represented here have a really important role to play in developing the industry in a responsible way. So we take these commitments really, really seriously. It's work that we know is going to take some time in some cases, but we are in it for the long haul here, and very open to any any and all organizations that want to have a seat at the table. That's for sure. And I think, again, just building on that, this is, again, as Matt said, reflecting on the vision of a world that runs entirely on green energy. We want to get there in a way that leaves the planet better than we found it. And so we're very proud to say that for the last 3 years, we've been ranked the most sustainable energy company in the world. It's certainly one thing to develop an offshore wind farm and build a supply chain. It's an entirely a different thing to do that in a way that protects the environment. And so we have made those commitments. As a company, we will become carbon neutral by 2025. But I think perhaps even more significantly, our entire footprint will be carbon neutral by 2040. And when you sort of take up that position as an industry leader, it's incumbent on you to work with your suppliers and other partners to make sure that they share those goals. And that is something that's very much a part of our procurement process and our work really across the industry here. So it's a goal that we need a lot of different organizations and businesses to be a part of, and we're working toward that every day and with every aspect of project development. I think in addition, also very important to mention that we've set a target of achieving a net positive biodiversity impact for each of our projects beginning in 2030. And that's something that, in the case of Delaware, we really hope to work with the Center for the Inland Bays and other environmental organizations and government regulators and departments to achieve in a way that really serves the community to the maximum extent possible. So a lot of really exciting environmental and sustainability oriented goals really play a key role in bringing these projects online. And with that, I think you've got our contact information through Danny, but here it is. You can always reach out to us directly or through Danny if you prefer. We're always here as a resource for you. Please don't hesitate, and that we'd be glad to take your questions.
Thank you. That is fabulous. That is wonderful. I think can you see the chat? There's a question from Jan Owens wondering about the impact of climate change, increasing numbers of extreme weather events on ocean-based wind farms. One, how much storm damage has been sustained? Have repairs been possible? And have plans been strengthened? Okay.
I'm happy to.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm happy to lead us off, Matt, and feel free to jump in. Do you want to take that?
No, I'd be happy to. I think so I can only speak with any knowledge about our U.S.-based wind farms. I know in general the design engineers that design the foundations, that design the wind turbine components, they typically look at 500-year weather events in terms of sea height and storm surge and wind gusts, and as well, because it's kind of a specialized local phenomena, they also do a lot of in the field, in situ field investigations before design criteria is established for any one wind farm. But I can say that for the two U.S. projects, for the Block Island project, as well as for the Coastal Virginia project, both of those have gone through hurricane events. There's been no issues in terms of how they operated through those events. They, in round terms, the turbines themselves have systems to feather and then eventually break when wind speeds continue to increase. So I know of no damage that was sustained as a result of those. Where my experience is actually where climate change is affecting us in some of the largest ways is with the onshore facilities that we're building. We're building operations and maintenance centers, and we're having to think about elevating higher than we typically would have thought about, because we don't know what the future truly is going to be. Nobody really does. So we've had to think about how do we protect those facilities so that they aren't damaged, and therefore their key functions of being able to house the crews and send them out to operate and maintain the wind farms, that those facilities can still be intact. So definitely that's where I personally know of the challenges is, and those are the same challenges that anybody who's in the construction and building industry certainly has today. But in particular, when you're directly locating facilities at the key side. So it's an interesting question. But it's something that's definitely on our minds.
Thank you. Yeah. And y'all can see the chat too. Clem Dinsmore Clem, you're not on this call. I'm not seeing you. So he has asked through Peggy for you all to comment on how Ørsted is proceeding in updating its cost estimates of the Skipjack Wind Phase 1 project, and how these costs will be affected by the firm's obtaining of Maryland's Public Service Commission approval of Phase 2 of its project. And then secondly, ideally indicate Ørsted's willingness to share the SIOW's firm's most recent estimate of project costs.
Sure. Well, the cost per kilowatt hour to the ratepayer in Maryland is for Skipjack 1 is a matter of public record. That's a $1.34. I think it's fair to say the price has come down considerably in the time since that project has been awarded, as the industry matures here and the pipeline grows. And the other thing to keep in mind for us for round 2 is that this process is governed by a state law than the first was, and this new law passed in 2019 has a ratepayer impact cap that all projects awarded now in the state must fall under that cap. And so the Public Service Commission will determine final pricing and final ratepayer impacts in consultation with the developers as part of the evaluation process. But costs certainly are trending down, and when you get to a place where the market is really mature, like in Europe, for example, and the supply chain has already been fully established, that's when you start to see a cost really start to decrease. So I think with regard to the conversation around SIOW, we'd be happy to just try to determine what specific information you're looking for. We do have quite a bit of reference material on this topic, and we'd be happy to share that, share what we can anyway with SIOW.
Peggy, unmute yourself.
Thanks. Actually, excuse me, I had spoken with Clem earlier about this cost situation, and I think where he's coming from is that he's read that that the supply line costs have greatly increased because of COVID. And he was thinking that maybe that would affect you all as your, I mean, you know, we had no COVID when you made your estimates originally, and then weird things have happened since then. And but you say that that even counting that, their costs are still going down.
That's right, and even the case, you know, in Maryland, for example, there is a state law that's going to govern this process. So, you know, our costs, you know, despite, you know, the costs involved with supply chain to the extent that those increases exist, we're still going to need to fall under that cap in order to get an award. Any developer would, given the way the law is written.
Thank you.
I'm not quite sure how to frame this question, but it sounds like the cost of improving the grid to carry this amount of energy might be pretty huge. And I don't understand this whole grid thing, but I know as part of the community solar, there's a big discussion about what the grid can manage. And so I guess some comments in that arena might be helpful to me. Was that a vague question?
No, maybe I can start. You know, earlier we talked about the benefits to Delaware, and you know, we indicated a $300 million investment that would need to be done in the electrical grid to make it be suitable for the amount of power that we plan to put into the grid, and those would be costs that would be borne by Ørsted as a developer of the project. So just as we will be paying for putting the cable underground and routing it to the substation, and just as we'll be paying for the substation cost, the cost of improving the grid so that it can be ready to accept our project is a project cost for us as well.
So that will cover then the distribution. It'll get to the substation, and then from the substation, it's distributed out. Am I doing that correctly? And so that'll be Sussex County, Maryland. What does that entail?
Well, where the final solution sits all rests on where we finally decide to make the interconnect position. So we're looking at multiple locations, but once we've decided where that's going to be, there will be monies that'll need to be spent by us as the developer to improve the grid to make it be suitable for that amount of power. So I can't today tell you exactly where. I can't put a pin on the map, but those costs will be borne by Ørsted as the developer.
I'm just trying to figure out who in turn does that benefit the Sussex County folks who receive electricity, the Wycomico County folks who receive electricity? I'm not quite sure how this all works, so that's why my question's a little vague.
Yes, so some of it is gonna, and I'm not being cagey either, but I you know, it will definitely depend on where the point of interconnect is. But we can definitely say that any improvements that we're making to the system will be not just to benefit our project, but will likely improve resiliency and reliability of the existing system as it stands today. So who specifically benefits from that? That still remains to be seen.
Okay,
once we've decided, and we can share where the point of interconnect is going to be. But it could be all those groups that you just mentioned.
okay. So I'm just thinking of it's plop in the middle of Sussex County, Delaware, that's one thing. If it's right on the edge of the state line, then it's another answer, and okay.
Right.
Other questions?
It looks like there are a couple in the chat
I'm
around.
sorry, I'm looking at the chat, go.
It looks like there are a couple around the recyclability and reuse of these components. One thing I think that we should have mentioned on the sustainability during the sustainability discussion is that I see questions about landfills and things like that. Ørsted actually doesn't send any of its turbine blades to landfills. So some of you may have seen those photos. Those are not of turbine blades and landfills, and those are not from Ørsted projects. And in fact, Ørsted is working not only to recycle and reuse the blades, but all of the components of the wind farm once they are decommissioned. There will likely be there are some uses now. There will likely be more as the need grows for sort of innovation and creative applications in this space, and technology improves as to the materials and what goes into actually creating the components themselves. But that's certainly an area of focus for Ørsted. There are some interesting test projects where in Denmark you use turbine blades as actually highway noise barriers, and other applications where you can turn them into building materials and things like that. So they certainly are recyclable. They are likely to become only more recyclable as time moves on, and they certainly will not end up in landfills, at least not from Ørsted wind farms.
Cool. I just opened up my chat, so I'm catching up. Are we on the question from Tom Brett, considering investing in the necessary upgrades to permit the expedited decommissioning of the Indian River Power Plant? Is converting the power plant into a plug-in site for offshore power be advantageous to starting from scratch?
It's a really interesting concept. It's certainly something that we're looking at this point. We've sort of followed the news around this like we all have been here, but it's certainly something we're looking at. I wouldn't go as far as to say it's an option for us at this point, but certainly something we're examining. And there's similar work that's going on in other parts of the country with similar facilities that have either will be decommissioned or have been decommissioned, and what some of the more interesting reuse plans are for those relative to offshore wind and other renewable energy technologies. So it's again something we're certainly studying. I think company-wide is fair to say that concept.
And I'll jump in with my question. Is there a time frame, maybe I missed it and you said it, when this decision will be made as to where the onshoring and substation site will be? What's the time frame for that?
Yeah, good question. I think as some of you may have seen, we're actually conducting offshore survey work in our lease area and closer to shore right now. There's similar work that's going to go on onshore just to make sure that the options that we do select are technically viable before we talk about stakeholder and community issues. We want to make sure that at least we have sites that can accommodate the work that we would need to do. And then, of course, we've said that we won't make a decision before we allow a time to talk about it publicly, and that's certainly something we're still committed to. So that work is going to go on through the later part of this year, and you know, as we are able to sort of narrow down those sites and those options, that's something that we'll hope to share probably in the first part of 2022. Matt, I don't know if you want to add anything on that point.
No, I think that's that, as well as you know, we're looking forward to a successful award of the Skipjack 2 bid from Maryland, and then you know, with that also begins a much larger process of submitting our construction and operations permit with BOEM, and then the public comment process that goes with that. And so a lot of that same public feedback, I think, will be super useful for us in determining, you know, of the options that we have, what does the public think about those? So we'll definitely be doing it in concert with that BOEM permitting process as well.
And then Jan Owens has said, I don't understand feather and break.
I dropped those words, so maybe I should be responsible for explaining myself. So I'll use my little prop here. So when the wind blows, you know, the turbine turns, but inside this nacelle up in here, there's a hydraulic braking mechanism that can kind of clamp around this main shaft and freeze this so that it can't turn anymore. So that, you know, should high wind events occur, the turbine can't continue to spin and spin and spin and eventually damage itself from spinning too fast. So that's the brake part. The feathering part may be a little bit hard to see with this model, but if you see the shape of the blade, it's kind of an asymmetrical shape, very much like an airplane wing. And just like an airplane wing can have adjustments to control its angle of attack into the wind, and therefore control how much lift is being produced by the blade. A wind turbine can do the same thing, and it does that by it has a rotation mechanism inside where this blade can actually twist and feather, so that this thicker part of the root that you can kind of see, and it's not the best camera image in the world, but the way to think about it is that instead of having an angle like this, it might turn a little bit so that the angle of attack is reduced, and therefore there's less lift that's being produced by the foil. So that's the feathering part.
Okay, I don't seem to be there's my chat. Here I go. Hang on a minute. I guess, Ruth Ann, are you still on here? You want to just ask your question? I feel stupid calling them. You want to unmute yourself and ask your question, Ruth Ann?
I think he answered it just fine. I now know what to say to my elected official. Yeah, about recycling. Thank you.
Great. And Chris, I'll just read it. Are there lease areas off the coast of Delaware for future Delaware wind farms?
So the lease area that photo or that screenshot that was on the screen, those are the only two wind energy areas that are currently off the coast of Maryland and Delaware. I will tell you that the Skipjack 2 project will not fill the balance of the lease area that we control. So there will be some capacity left in that lease area if we're successful at the end of this year. BOEM is undertaking a process to identify new lease areas, sort of in New England and also on the West Coast. Right now, we haven't seen anything around additional lease areas in the Mid-Atlantic, but it's certainly possible that could be the case in the future.
So basically, it sounds like Delaware is SOL right now, unless we can put something in federal waters.
Well, I'm not, all these lease areas are in federal waters. And so, you wouldn't necessarily, just to sort of go back to one of the points that Matt was making around sort of where the electrons and where the power would flow. We're our lease area it's a Maryland project, Maryland sponsored project, for example. Maryland is getting credit for building this project, and so too could Delaware by building in a lease area that might not be directly off the coast of Delaware. There are certainly other options and additional capacity where you could still plug into the same grid network, or Delaware is still sponsoring the wind farm, and therefore getting the offshore renewable energy credit, the OREC, which is sort of the financing mechanism that states have developed to support the development of these wind farms.
So we could have a wind farm located off of somebody else's coast and get the same credits.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
It's all in the way the program is designed in Delaware. In some states, there are geographic, like in Maryland, the wind farms have to be within 90 miles of Maryland's coast, and that was a state level decision that was made. So it's really up to the state of Delaware and how the legislature may structure, any potential offshore wind program.
Well, just from a schoolyard fairness level, it seems to me like Maryland stole our lease areas. They got there first, so they got to claim them for the state of Maryland. Now, we might have a little bit of skipjack 2 left over, but all of the lease areas that are close to us are already taken with Maryland.
Well, it's, the names of these lease areas can sometimes be a little bit misleading. The Maryland wind energy area or the Delaware wind energy area, they really never had an association, and this is the case up and down the East Coast, with any particular state. All the lease areas are in federal waters, and so they're, it's not a situation where Maryland sort of got there first, and that's your lease area, for example, that Maryland is now using. The lease areas are all designated by the federal government. The leasing rights are awarded to offshore wind developers, who then go into the states that have these programs and compete for the awards. So it's not a situation where Maryland and Delaware are competing necessarily for this space. It was never really intended for one state over the other, and again, that's the case off the entire East Coast.
All right. Well, it seems pretty confusing from that point of view. So yeah. I think that's something that you in your public communication might be able to explain a little better, because it is very confusing. I've been reading all of your PR and I still don't understand that. So I appreciate you answering that. Thank you.
It's sure thing. Glad to do it. It's a complicated process, and we understand that. And it's you can really only get into it by having conversations like this. It's hard to explain in a short period of time. But I appreciate the question, and it's certainly something that we'll take your advice on and continue to try to have these discussions.
Okay, Peggy Schultz has asked, there are people complaining that because President Biden requested that the red tape be cut in order to expedite offshore wind projects, that some environmental safeguards have gotten short shrift. Is that correct?
I would say from our perspective that is certainly not the case. There's an extensive federal permitting process that every offshore wind project has to work its way through. It's close to a 2-year process. that timeline and the elements that are contained in that timeline have not changed. And so, Ørsted is working its way through that process with a number of the projects that we currently have in development. And even despite the very high standards that those permitting processes require, Ørsted too holds itself to a high standard in this regard, employing marine biologists and other professionals who ensure that we are great stewards of the environment, whether we're offshore and talking about the construction and operation of the wind farm itself, or onshore and building that infrastructure.
Other questions that people want to, I think that's all the ones in the chat. Peggy, unmute yourself.
Yeah, I wondered, apropos Chris's concern, I wonder if you all would be able to show that map again that you showed earlier in the presentation, and show where an additional wind farm could possibly be located.
I'm happy to bring up the map. If your question is about additional lease areas, that's really not for Ørsted to say where a particular lease area could be located. That's really a decision that the federal government makes. It's not one that any developer would have any control over. But let me.
But they've already been established, though. I don't mean. I don't mean that you should forecast which parts will be used, but they've already been delineated, and I just wondered if you could show us where.
Oh, in the existing lease area. I'm sorry. Yeah. So it's really this area up here. We're building out the plan is to build out the lease area really from south to north. Skipjack 2 is not intended to fill this entire lease area here, so it would be, without. I mean, this is sort of just pure speculation, just because we don't know how large a project may be or what the requirement might look like. But in all likelihood, it would be somewhere in the northern part of this lease area that balance of the developable area would be located.
So again, maybe I missed that, but then if there were like a Delaware project, then part of that lease area could then be used from that federally designated area.
That's right. Yes.
So, I mean, you could have a Maryland wind farm, a Maryland turbine here and a Delaware turbine here.
Yeah. Exactly.
And could you also mix and match companies? So if like US Wind did something, or how would that interface?
Not within the lease areas themselves, but again, depending on how the Delaware program would be structured, if it accounts for wind energy areas for a certain distance from shore, for example, then sure, you could include lease areas that other developers control, and they might participate in a competitive process to bid. So that's certainly within the realm of possibility.
There's been a lot of talk about bigger and bigger and bigger turbines. Has it established what size you guys are going to use, and how does that work?
So the Public Service Commission approved last summer the turbine for Skipjack Wind 1. That is the GE Haliade turbine. It's Matt sort of maybe can bring up his model there and show you the exact dimensions of what's where. But yeah, Matt, maybe are you still on?
Sure. Yeah, if you can hear me okay. So the Haliade is in round terms it's a 109 meter blade length, and the overall height above the water line to the highest point was in the neighborhood of 850 to 860 feet, as I recall. So yeah, those were probably the key dimensions that the Maryland Public Service Commission was very interested in getting feedback from the citizens of Maryland on, and that was what was approved June of last year, I believe.
That's right. And to the question about bigger, there's certainly an important distinction between a larger turbine physically and a more powerful turbine. We've included, for example, a 14.7 megawatt turbine in our Skipjack 2 proposal. That machine has the same dimensions as the 12 megawatt machine. It just got more powerful internal components and can generate more electricity.
So the big hoo-ha has been, save our view kind of stuff. And are these the same size that were initially proposed that people were making such a fuss about, or are these larger?
They are the same. Those dimensions that Matt just gave there, from the water line to the tip of the blade when it's at the very top position is 800 and it's about 855 feet, between 850 and 860 feet. That hub, the nacelle there in the middle, is about 550 feet above the water line there. And so those dimensions are going to translate to the turbine that we're proposing to use for Skipjack 2.
Okay, cool. I have to quote Charlie Garlow, who says that he thinks that wind turbines are like ballet dancers, that they are quite beautiful.
That's great. I'll have to steal that one. That's a good one. Yeah.
And as one who frequently drives by the Delaware City manufacturing refinery plant, I'll take a wind turbine, excuse me.
Yeah, really.
You have a beautiful one at the University of Delaware.
True,
Right.
But not as big as y'all, so.
That's right.
I'm trying to get my chat up here. Does anybody else have any questions that I'm not seeing here? My chat has disappeared.
Yeah, I thought I posted one, but I don't.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, do you want to ask it, Janet?
Well, it sounds like I'm not a naysayer. I agree with Carol and everyone else that we've got to do this. However, I'm just wondering if you talk about the impact of sea level rise when you're considering the transmission lines and things like that. If we have a monster storm, we don't want to end up like Louisiana with no power outages. How do we protect that sort of infrastructure?
Yeah, Matt, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So we talked a little bit earlier about, the plans to do upgrades to the existing grid to make it suitable for our project to connect it to it. I don't work in the area where we work directly with PJM to determine what those specific upgrades are going to be. But I have a suspicion that part of it is going to be, so if a point in the grid today, from this point to the next point over, needs to be upgraded to take the additional Ørsted capacity. And while we're upgrading that section, if there are existing resiliency issues, and they might have to do with above ground lines, above ground lines that have been susceptible to damage because of wind-driven limbs and debris, or existing facilities that might have been damaged because of rising water levels or flooding. In my mind, it only makes sense that if between A and B, we're asking Ørsted to make some improvements to make the system suitable for their additional power, let's at the same time improve any of the things between A and B that are also lessons learned of what it means to operate a facility in a changing climate. So I would say that as a matter of practice, I think the engineers and the people who run PJM and are going to be focused on working with us to upgrade the grid to make it suitable for our system to come online, that they're also looking at not just what a singular focus point of what do we have to do to make it suitable for Ørsted. They're probably going to be looking at doing many things at the same time, including resiliency around climate change. So I can't tell you specifically what that means, but I've got to think that is the methodology that this is going to be viewed in.
Thank you. Definitely make sure that they do that.
Absolutely.
So, and just remind me, you guys are a Danish company, and doesn't Ørsted have a bunch of wind turbines like in the North Sea? And they haven't got, I mean, that's the weather there is pretty extreme, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So.
Indeed, yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah, we are 50% owned by the Danish government, actually. So, but yeah, a tremendous amount of the project experience in the North Sea, in the Baltic region.
Good point. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Questions? Peggy, unmute yourself, Peggy. Unmute.
I'm showing up on two screens. Sorry.
Oh, there you are. You're wonderful in both places.
I didn't mean to do that. I just lost the window on one computer, so I went to another one. But I'm wondering if you all had to make, when you got these contracts for Maryland, if you all had to make any special concessions in terms of commercial fishing, because sometimes the drag netters complain that the platforms get in the way of their nets, or their drag, the drag nets, or even purse seining, or a lot of different ways to do it, I guess.
Yeah, it's a great question. There are no specific commitments in the Skipjack 1 contract with the state of Maryland, but it's an issue that Ørsted's really engaged with, particularly in New England, but also, of course, in New Jersey and Maryland and Delaware. And so just because a commitment isn't in an award contract doesn't mean that we won't work to mitigate any issues that might exist. We can, a good example of how we try to accommodate some of the concerns that you're talking about. If indeed there is a wind farm that's located in a really active commercial fishing ground, you can adapt the layout So it is a grid layout, for example, which all of our projects in the U.S. are. Makes it very easy to transit between the wind farm and do an operation like you're talking about, commercial fishing or something to that effect, especially with the spacing between the turbines of between 0.8 and 1 nautical mile, really considerable space in between the actual turbine positions. So that's an example. You can obviously change the configuration even and trying to optimize the way the wind farm is oriented on that grid and other things. So it's an ongoing conversation for sure. And the input of commercial fishing interest is quite important in that process. I can tell you in the case of Skipjack's wind farm, it's really not an active, a hugely active commercial fishing ground today. The same is true with some other areas where we've got projects in development, but that's not to minimize the concerns and the questions that are being raised. We'll certainly continue that engagement. But again, just because there's not a condition that's inside of an order doesn't mean that we won't do what we can to mitigate those concerns and impacts.
I don't mean to be asking all these negative questions to make it seem like I'm the enemy or something, but I just I'd like to head off the opposition, and as the question that Ruth Ann asked too, is important for us to know the responses to those things.
That's why we're here. They're not at all. We appreciate the questions, and we're here to give this information and have this discussion. So absolutely, we welcome it.
Maybe one other thing to add is that we've worked closely with a company based locally that has developed a maritime simulator for vessel operators to use and this simulator, very much like a flight simulator, it's set up like the bridge of a ship, and there are screens that mimic what the captain would see when they're taking the simulated vessel through. But it's a simulation of our Ocean Wind New Jersey wind farm, and there are different vessel types that can be selected, but it's used as a training tool to gain that experience. If you're a ship's captain, if you're a commercial fisherman, if you're a Coast Guard operator, what is it like to try to transit the wind farm and to understand in different weather conditions, how do I navigate through here? And so far it's been very, very well received. And I think our intent is to do the same thing for the Skipjack layout as it matures, is to develop the same kind of simulation.
Yeah.
That's very cool. And pardon me, I keep showing Peggy and me. How many turbines will be in each project?
So there are 9 currently planned for Skipjack 1, and the 760 megawatt wind farm proposal that is in front of the commission is up to 60 turbines.
60?
Yep. So a total of 69 positions. Yeah, just under 70.
So the first one is 9, which is a small number, and 60 is a big number.
Yes.
And these are the more powerful, the same size turbines,
right? But
the more powerful ones.
That's right.
Are you all using those Haliade turbines? I call it turbine. I don't know what's the correct pronunciation. Are you using those great big ones, Haliade 10? You maybe
we are the
earlier.
We are, yeah. The Haliad 12 megawatt is the one that was approved by the commission, Public Service Commission in Maryland last summer, and we have used a 14.7 megawatt turbine, a GE Haliad a turbine, just a more powerful version of that turbine in this for this proposal.
Thank you.
So the first one are 12, is that what you said? And then the second ones are 14.7. Got that? Is that right?
That's right. That's right.
And there are a whole bunch more of them.
Yes.
How far apart did you say they are? I missed that, like a mile?
They are 0.8 nautical miles, which I think, Matt, is just about one statute mile. Maybe.
That's right. It's just about one statute mile.
A statute mile? Is that a?
Just
like
a normal mile. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those fishermen ought to be able to miss them, huh?
Yeah. We hope.
Peggy, you look like you're cooking up another question.
No, I was just leaving my one computer and declaring my allegiance to my laptop.
There you go. There you go. I'll give people a few more minutes to think of other questions. And that is very cool. You guys are terrific. And Danny, you are terrific. Thank you for participating. Thank you for rounding up these brilliant people. We look forward to knowing where this is going to land in Delaware. I think that's a hot topic. I hope that this crew, we are your advocates. Peggy, I don't know whether, Peggy, did you introduce yourself as the power person? Do that, please.
No, I'm the facilitator for POWER, which stands for People for Offshore Wind Energy Resources. And we're gearing up to for the report that's supposed to come out the end of the year, and then we're going to go full steam ahead.
So we are your advocates here upstate and downstate. And I know, I think Tom Brett was on this call, and Charlie and I were at the meeting downstate, and I forget what it was, Milford. There was so much fuss about the Save Our View people. So whatever we can do to be helpful and be your voice along the way, Peggy and IHB and Tree with Plastic Free Delaware, we're certainly on your side, and that's why we ask all the questions.
Absolutely.
And I typed a thing in the chat, and I just wanted to say it out loud that I'm so grateful for you guys and what you're committed to doing, because it actually gives me some hope. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so thanks again. I'll do my little pitch for October 18th. Hope to see many of you back. We have sort of random topics. So also, if anybody has suggestions or thoughts for conversations, speakers, topics, that is wonderful. Dee and I would be happy to entertain your thoughts. So good night, sweet dreams, all that good stuff. Huh?
Thanks, Jill. Thanks for organizing. See you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Brady. Thank you, Danny.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
Thank you. Have a good night.